Hello, and thank you for joining us today for Frost and Sullivan's Growth Council think tank, accelerating 5G monetization through network-aware applications. My name is Sabrina, and before we begin, I would like to go over a few notes. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the think tank. As always, you can utilize the raise hand feature or the Q&A, so you're welcome to do it. Today's event will be available on demand shortly after we have finished, and we will have a poll question and look forward to your interaction. Now, I want to hand it over to Vice President, Global Sector Leader, and Growth Expert, Vikrant Gandhi, who will lead today's think tank.
Thanks, Sabrina. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's think tank on strategies to accelerate 5G monetization through network-aware applications. My name is Vikrant Gandhi. I'm the Global Sector Leader and Vice President of Research for Frost & Sullivan. So 5G is a revolutionary technology. That's almost like stating the obvious, right? And the potential to transform the way we communicate is immense. If you look at how fast 5G adoption has taken place, when 3G came in, I think we took around 12 years for 3G to reach 1 billion users globally. Then 4G came in, we took approximately 5 years for 4G to reach 1 billion users. And with 5G, we have exceeded 1 billion users globally in less than 3 years. Let that sink in a little bit. To support that growth, approximately anywhere from, I think 80 to $100 billion worth of investment goes just into the public network infrastructure portion. And then another hundreds of billions of dollars has already been spent to acquire the spectrum that's needed to deliver these next generation 5G services. And now as an industry, we must monetize this investment and ensure that we have to grow the number of connections, obviously, but we also must focus on increasing the average value of each connection on the network. And the good news, I think, is that we have available to us a bouquet of technology options that, if we use those in the right way, they can definitely help achieve this objective, right? And I think that's important, if used in the right way. Now, speaking a little bit about the architecture of 5G, the whole services-based architecture, software-centric approach, everything is designed to enable new and innovative applications. And from an enterprise perspective, from a business perspective, the objective of any digital transformation initiative, of which connectivity forms a very important component, you have to use that to increase efficiency, enhance productivity, improve the collaboration, and deliver enhanced customer experiences and customer services. And I think to fully realize these benefits of 5G, the most fundamental requirements is you should be, in the first place, you should be able to easily access and use these 5G network capabilities, right? And this is, I think, where a coherent, consistent, and a converged network strategy comes in. And if everything is done well, in an ideal scenario, a well-crafted monetization scheme, it really can empower developers to do a lot. You can have enterprise developers create these amazing mobile and IoT applications that can harness the full potential of 5G to deliver what we call intelligent network solutions, right? Now, again, 5G monetization, if you look at the whole opportunity universe, I think we all can agree that IoT, B2B, B2B2X will be among the dominant ways to grow subscribers and get access to these millions of new connections that are required to support this business case for 5G. Now, a challenge that has been there in the past is that, we have this wonderful network on one side, we have the end users, we have the enterprise or the organization on the other side. And it has been a little bit of a friction between having these developers that are creating these enterprise applications. When we ask them to code to the network, they should be able to do that with ease. And I would really encourage you to think about something like a chat GPT here. Imagine the level of complexity that's abstracted behind that lovely interface wherein anybody can go in, type something they want, and you can just get this wealth of information presented to you in such an easy to use manner. And I think that's the inspiration that we must take from that environment and sort of bring that into 5G. The idea is to make it easy to use, monitor, manage the lifecycle of next generation applications. We are privileged to have distinguished industry experts join us today and share their perspectives on what makes a compelling 5G monetization strategy and what the future holds. I am delighted to welcome Christou, Senior Vice President at Booz Hamilton, and Ramesh Kaza, who's the President and Chief Commercial Officer at Shabodi. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Vikrant. Great to be here.
Thank you, Vikrant. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So before we start the discussion, maybe Chris, you could give a brief introduction to Booz Allen Hamilton and talk about your role at the company. And then Ramesh, you could do that after Chris, please.
Sure. Chris Christou, Senior Vice President, Booz Allen. I'm part of our Chief Technology organization, where the team that I help lead up really tries to take these cutting edge technologies, do the applied research around them, experimentation, prototyping, and really bring them to market for the plethora of projects that we execute on a daily basis for our customer set. A very large focus on U.S. public sector, of course, but we do have commercial and international clients as well. One of the big focus areas that I lead up across the firm is 5G Next G. And so we're certainly excited for the conversation today, and have already embarked on a number of projects where we're taking some of these new technologies, working with industry vendors to deploy them in both prototype and soon-to-be production environments, seeking out those new use cases that can be achieved with these new technologies. So again, thank you for having us.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. So I work for Shabodi. Shabodi is a 3-year-old startup company. And our mission is to take the advanced networks like 5G to go beyond connectivity. We believe that there is big potential to exploit from these advanced networks like 5G. So we are building an application platform that will allow developers to build mission critical applications for enterprises. So I'm excited to be here today. This is a passionate topic for me, and great to have you, Vikrant and Chris, on this call.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you. So, I opened this conversation with commenting on 5G being a revolutionary technology. But Chris, let's spend a minute on that. So the 5G value proposition, what does 5G really bring to the table, and the excitement that's built around 5G? Is it really justified? Can you please share some thoughts on what you see as the potential and the expanding universe of opportunities in 5G, please?
Yeah, sure. I think with 5G, it's the first G, if you will, that incorporates into its native architecture things like edge cloud, edge storage, and of these other platform environments, which are very exciting for us, especially when we talk about deploying new types of applications at the edge, especially in environments where it might be, downgraded environments, sort of difficult environments to be in, especially in mission critical use cases, as well as those that might not have connectivity back to a centralized hosting facility. So I think that's really the excitement that 5G brings, in addition to the triumvirate that we talk about, enhanced bandwidth, ultra reliable, low latency communications, and massive number of devices that it can support. I think those two things are really the things that really bring a lot of excitement and sort of justified the early hype. To be honest with you, I think now it's good that we're getting past the hype phase, because it really gets to what are these use cases that will really drive adoption. And we think it's more in the enterprise, mission critical type of, in government space, where we're going to see a lot of these more exciting uses of 5G. And as a result, really push the bar with the ecosystem of device manufacturers and application developers in terms of incorporating those new features that 5G offers and making them compliant with the standards and things like that. One of the reasons why we've worked with Shabodi thus far is really that promise of, having those network aware applications. And as Ramesh referred to, in those mission critical situations where you need to prioritize the allocation of bandwidth to support certain types of applications and users, it really becomes critical. It's almost been an elusive goal of ours within the industry. For those of us who go way back, there was integrated services in-serve with RSVP signaling that was meant to reserve bandwidth within the network. There were even bandwidth broker type of proposals. But I think now with 5G and the types of APIs that are made available and what companies like Shabodi are doing to try to make that easier for application developers to code their applications to, it really, really holds a lot of promise. And we're starting to see some of the carriers and other companies, OEM vendors, adopt these types of tools as well. It just gets it's important for those application developers to get used to developing applications that interact with the network. For so long, it's almost been sort of over the top, right? Where there hasn't been, except for, indirectly something like TCP, let's say, there hasn't really been this, explicit signaling between the application and network that we're starting to see with 5G.
Yes. Thank you, Chris. And you certainly, when you talked about the historical paradigms that we have used, the request response architecture and delivering one services to everything that's connected, I think we have to move away from that and ensure that it's not just a one-time interaction, it's personalization and customization at scale through the life cycle of an application. I think that's one of the promises of 5G. So Ramesh, now enterprise adoption, why do you think that is going to be critical for 5G success? And when we talk about enterprises, the question is about delivering, or what challenges are we addressing? And the enterprise conversation is usually around outcomes-centric vertical solutions. So why do you think enterprise adoption is going to be critical for 5G success? And conversely, how will 5G help deliver what the enterprises want?
Yeah, Vikrant, I think during the opening, you said the billions of dollars have been spent in upgrading the infrastructure to support 5G. And then on top of that, spectrum licensing. So there has to be a way to recoup all those costs, right? So definitely consumer applications and recouping the money from the consumers is one way. But I believe that there is a huge opportunity to monetize these things from selling it to the enterprises. Why? If you think about 5G, it brings in multiple technologies together. So that's what Chris was talking about. It brings in not only the end devices, user equipment, it brings in the edge computing, it brings in the cloud. By bringing in several devices, a lot of data gets generated. So you start using analytics and AI. This is an area that is of interest to enterprises. So if you look at it in the consumer world, it's all about experience, right? So let's say a consumer who is calling a contact center looks for an experience, but businesses look for outcome. And with 5G, what happened is it's a service-based architecture. So the functions are modularized. So the radio functions, the core functions, and so forth. So customers have option to pick and choose from different vendors to build the overall 5G network. But that's a advantage to customers from an economic point of view, but it is also a challenge. The challenge is they have to deal with these individual components. So what they look for is the solution. So they have a problem, right? So let's say if they're building a manufacturing plant, now they don't want to go with wired connectivity, because wired connectivity will not give them the flexibility to rearrange their workflows, right? If they need to produce one component more compared to the another one, that's an outcome. Similarly, if you are working in a mine or you are working in a port, the outcome that they are looking for is about worker safety. So to achieve that outcome, what is critical is the vendors who are supplying the 5G solutions or the 5G network has to bring all the components together and deliver it as a solution. It could be a drone-based inspection. It could be a video sensors to do the quality control, right? For example, we have done a work with Booz and Hamilton to do a mobile medic. That's an end-to-end solution helping emergency services and the healthcare. So I believe understanding the vertical market and the customer's business objectives is very, very critical in driving the adoption of 5G networks in enterprise.
Definitely. Thanks, Ramesh. And I like how you outlined a step-by-step approach, understand the problems, understand what it takes to build a solution, bring it together, integrate that. And that's where you work with partners such as Booz and Hamilton as well to deliver these, almost out-of-the-box implementations that make it, again, goes back to making it easy for the enterprises to use 5G, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Yes. So taking a step back, so if you think about end-to-end requirements, right? I mean, if we have to outline certain imperatives for 5G enablement and monetization, you have to make 5G available. So availability and accessibility is probably the first step. Then access is the next, stage, I guess. After that, probably solution development. And then you have to have a big picture vision, because both Ramesh, you and Chris talked about, the different components that need to sort of come together. And I guess one of the last stages is to measure application performance on an ongoing basis. So if something like a mobile medic, for example, you have to ensure that the criticality is respected and the access and communication flow keeps on happening, right? So let's talk about each of these parameters, starting with you, Chris. So how do you make sure that 5G deployments are simplified? The 5G networks can be deployed in a simplified manner. For example, one of the things we hear about a lot is growth of as a service deployment model. But curious to know what your thoughts are on making sure 5G is available and accessible easily, Chris.
Yeah, it's really critical, especially in the instances where an enterprise has requirements more for a private 5G wireless implementation. And that's where, depending on the requirements, there could be a lot involved in terms of obtaining the right frequency bands, getting the RAN deployed, getting the core deployed, doing SIM provisioning and the like. And I think these as a service models are very exciting, especially for certain types of customers, right? I thought it was fascinating that two of the major hyperscalers, right? Microsoft acquired Metaswitch, and as well as Affirm Networks, and then AWS rolled out their private 5G service offering. I'm not sure how much that has really taken root yet, but I think it's certainly very interesting, because if you look at how cloud was adopted, it really involved how, for just any application developer, they could go online, get an environment spun up, get an EC2 instance in the AWS case, going out there and really start hosting their applications there. Of course, then after that, they realized that they had to make sure that they had the right amount of security implemented. But I think that's the type of model that the hyperscalers are trying to go after. And it really becomes an interesting scenario where you have those hyperscalers perhaps getting more into the space of the carriers, and vice versa with some of the services that the carriers have rolled out as it relates to edge cloud. So I really think it's critical, but I don't know how much it's taken root. And then you even have, in terms of monetization, obviously if your requirements lead you to be a consumer of public 5G services, things like access to network slicing is really going to be critical in those types of scenarios, right? And we haven't to date seen that really take widespread adoption across the industry, but we're starting to see that. You have the support within the products for private wireless implementations, but also, the announcement by T-Mobile, for example, providing access to a slice for developers is certainly very exciting, especially for those types of use cases. So I think the as a service model for those users that might not have as strict as security requirements, might not need as much control over the O&M associated with the 5G network, and will consistently have that connectivity back to a central location. It can work, and we're just going to have to see how much it becomes adopted.
Yes. No, I agree, Chris. Thank you for that. And yes, there have been some encouraging developments around features such as network slicing and other stuff that's coming out. And I think we are in exciting times. So we are getting there. But so accessibility and access is the part of it, right? But after that comes ease of solution development. And when Booz Allen Hamilton works with your customers, how do you encourage, or how do you sort of suggest or recommend they think about how to go about solution development? How do you, because I think that's very important to encourage a wider adoption. So any thoughts on ease of solution development once the network is made available, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, even as the network is being made available, right? I think it's important, we like to adopt sort of systems engineering best practices, going through the requirements, really understanding what those are and how that even drives the network deployment, even prior to the solution development, right? I think you have to have an idea of the types of applications and devices that you're going to be deploying in order to drive the performance requirements that you're building, in particular when you have private wireless instantiation. So we really like to have this sort of mission use case approach that we call it, where at the outset, really trying to have, not making it a long drawn out requirements development process, and you have these heavyweight, programs associated with it, but really just trying to drive to what are the mission outcomes, what are the use cases that would be driving the adoption of 5G. So it's understood from the beginning. So then you can drive what are those types of devices you need to support, what are the types of applications you need to develop that take advantage of 5G, and it's just not an add-on, or you're not just doing 5G for the sake of doing 5G. You actually see those real outcomes from it. And I in particular think that, the industry will continue to be more creative. I think, some of these use cases and the types of applications that can be developed, now that we have this new sort of tech stack that, as we call it, available to users, it just the sky's the limit in terms of the types of use cases that can be supported. And that'll require some creativity amongst enterprises and the application developers themselves.
Absolutely. And I love how you describe, and I think those are my thoughts exactly, that sky is the limit. And I think a critical part of making that happen is to make it easy. Goes back to our conversation earlier about creating this interface, this technology to abstract or to make it easy for developers to use without having to learn these complex nuances of telecommunications, I guess. So Ramesh, let me ask you here. So access to network capabilities, and I guess a part of it is also ensuring consistent application fidelity and performance through embedded network capabilities in 5G, right? What are your thoughts on some of the best practices and possibly your approach to making that happen?
Yeah, good question, Vikrant. So the power of 5G is all about exposure of the network capabilities to the developers. So if you look at the 5G core, all of the network functions, when I say network functions, they are like session management function, policy control function, they're all modularized. And they communicate through APIs internally. And all these network capabilities are exposed to the developers through what is called a network exposure function. So developers can tap into that network exposure function and then build their applications. But there is a challenge. Typically, you will see multi-vendor deployments, right? Even in an enterprise, for example, you may deploy one vendor technology, a radio vendor, a core vendor technology in one site, and then maybe in another vendor technology. Second is enterprises also grow through acquisitions, right? So when they acquire, they end up probably inheriting some other vendor. So in that case, how can an application that an enterprise built on one vendor will work on another vendor, right? It won't, because the developers are building applications in using a vendor's API. So this is where we saw, as in Shabodi, an opportunity and a gap, white space. So what we are building is an application enablement platform that abstracts all the network functions and APIs from various vendors, and then gives the developers a simple interface. So what this makes is a developer doesn't have to understand the telecom network standards. They don't have to understand each vendor's APIs. So all they need to know is one common API that they can program. So that's what we've been doing it. What this makes is development work fast. Applications have seamless access to the network capabilities, and they work irrespective of the underlying vendor that the customers choose.
Wonderful, Ramesh. And I think I can see the potential here because you're not only abstracting the complexity, you're also making sure there's a certain element of being future-proof in this, right? When you're making an investment in, yeah, and then you don't want that to because, you know, some market dynamic happened, like an acquisition, and you're not sure if a long-term access will be maintained. So I think I sort of appreciate the value you offer to enabling all this.
Correct. Also, one other thing also, Vikrant, is the enterprise developers are used to seeing APIs, right? Whether they, let's say they deploy a CRM system or an ERP system, they are used to seeing APIs and they integrate that into their workflows, right? Very easily.
Yes.
So having a similar type of common APIs will help them drive adoption of the 5G more in the enterprise and integrate into the workflows and so forth. That's where you see the productivity, like operational excellence and so forth.
That's a great point. I agree, Ramesh. Thank you. So coming back to you, Chris, you know, you sort of talked about the tech stack. Now that's a term that can be interpreted in many ways, but if you look at what 5G has to offer, I think we are using 5G as an umbrella term in the industry. There's really, you know, a lot of systems, platforms, technologies, and framework that must work together. Things like edge cloud, Gen AI now, 5G NR, open standards, other ongoing enhancements. From a customer perspective, how do you help them get this big picture vision, or how do you yourself get this big picture vision, understand everything that's involved in making a service happen, and then make sure that everything is sort of aligned in a consistent framework to enabling these outcomes centric applications that we have been talking about? What's the big picture vision philosophy that you have, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big picture, right, is that you know, that the 5G is really enabling the deployment of that new technical stack. And we look at it as, if you really look at the connectivity layer, right, that you have that expansion of connectivity options and and the enhancement of performance. You know, we've talked about the three areas: enhanced bandwidth, ultra reliable, low latency communications, massive number of devices, which is really a cornerstone of the type of performance that can be provided for new types of devices. So that's the other layer, is the new types of devices that can now connect to the network and really take advantage of these performance characteristics. And that's one area where, you know, I think industry is still, you know, catching up. The announcement, for example, by Apple of their support for private 5G was really critical to try to start to get the rest of the ecosystem going here in terms of getting their devices to be able to support private instantiations as well as expanding it to other types of devices, IoT devices, XR devices, and the like. We're still seeing that formulate. The other area is, of course, as we've talked about, edge cloud. And the sort of unique thing with 5G is that edge cloud is already integrated natively into the standards and into the interfaces that have been defined. Now, the one footnote there is, in order to take full advantage of 5G, you'd want a full standards-based MEC, right? But that doesn't stop one to deploy and extend the hyperscaler services out to the edge with, you know, deployments like Azure Edge and AWS Snowball and Outpost and the like. And then from there, you build the new types of applications, extending even AI to those edge type of devices to really empower those application developers to take advantage of that, whether it be detecting things in a video on the edge to get quicker detection times, or even to be able to support that in a disconnected environment, to deploying other types of edge applications there, whether it be for manufacturing or mining and the like. So in order for our customers to be able to understand that a lot of it is dependent on open standard interfaces, which is really, really critical in this arena, whether they be free GPP based, Open RAN based, as well as, I mentioned MEC as well in terms of the deployment of those types of edge cloud instantiations. But then from there, once you have the platform set, making it not as complex for the application developers and those enterprises to bring those services there, based on two types of characteristics that the platform would have, which would be services like those offered by Shabodi to make it easy for those application developers. So some of that complexity can be made abstract, as well as, and it's something that we at Booz Allen have been working on, is extending those hyperscaler services to the edge so that an application developer has the same types of services that they're deploying for their enterprise applications now available to them on that edge cloud. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. What I found very interesting was that, some of these capabilities that we are talking about, these are natively being built or natively already built into the 5G stack, right? And with the continued push towards open standard, one of the objectives there is to ensure this seamless interaction and interoperability. And I guess, yes, there are a few moving parts, and not of them are at the same level at the same time, but everybody is probably going to end up at a similar level. And that is where the magic will fully happen, right, Chris? And somebody like Booz Allen Hamilton, along with your partners, has that ability to look at the big picture, have that vision, make it easily available to address the challenges of enterprise adoption, right?
Definitely.
Thank you. So, we have talked about making the network available. We have talked about solution development, having the big picture vision, access network capabilities. But let me come back to you, Ramesh. So, and this is something, I said at the beginning of the conversation, getting access to network capabilities is one part, but then you need to ensure that the application itself or the endpoint itself has continued access to those capabilities through the life cycle of either that session or the device or the application itself. How do you enable a consistent application performance? How do you ensure that you have the appropriate level of visibility into network parameters like the network traffic conditions, and accordingly adjust your communication constructs to deliver a consistent application performance?
Yeah. So if you look at our traditional application development, the developers have built the applications assuming that the underlying network guarantees the performance, right? So it's a best effort. Like today we are on Zoom and we are hoping, right, the network behaves correctly, right, for us to be on the call. But when you are doing these mission critical applications, we cannot expect that, right? Depend on just pure the best effort. We need a guaranteed behavior from the network. It could be a bandwidth, it could be a latency, right? And anything like that. So to ensure that consistent application performance, we believe that there are two set of network capabilities that must be available to the developers. So the fundamental one, we call it as a network insight. So the network insight APIs are the one that the developer can use to understand what is the state of the network. Chris was talking about, is the network edge device congested? For example, if I have a user equipment, which radio to choose from, or which edge node, right, to choose from. So those are the insight APIs that need to be available to the application developer on a consistent basis. They form the foundational capabilities for developers to take it to the next level, such as modifying the network capabilities in real time. This could be like a quality on demand, right? This could be a drone is flying in, but the drone has multiple sensors. It has thermal imaging sensors. It has LiDAR sensors. It has high definition cameras. depending on the function that the drone is performing, the application developer needs to dynamically adjust the network characteristics for the camera, high bandwidth. So those are the second set of APIs. I call them as a network service APIs. So they need to be made available, right, to the developers. So the combination of those network insight APIs and the service APIs will make the applications interact with the network and use the network more effectively, and then deliver on those mission critical applications that the enterprises need.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ramesh. So I think what I heard was it's, getting access is one part, monitoring it through the session is the second part, but also the ability for the application or the endpoint to talk to the network and, depending on the local conditions or the requirements, be able to request the network to be configured in such a way in real or near real time so that the fidelity is maintained, right? So I think what we are talking about here is another level, which is, it's not just about one-way service delivery, it's about interactive service delivery and customization and configuration based on dynamic parameters. Right, Ramesh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For example, I mean, Booz has built the mobile medic application. And this is an application that helps the field person to get a mentor to assist in the field, right, with an emergency, say, medical situation. So in that situation, the field medic device needs all the bandwidth available and the latency for that application to function. So the ability to get the insights from the network and the ability to send a request from the application to the network, so that for the duration of that session, the network parameters are configured and guaranteed. And those are the critical aspects when you're building those mission critical applications.
Yes, yes. Thank you, thank you. And I think we have a quick poll section question here, Sabrina. So if you don't mind, can you just bring up the polling question for the audience?
Yes, sure. Thank
And
you.
we'll just give them,
Vikrant, very much.
Yeah, we'll just wait for 30-40 seconds, and then I think we can move on to the next topic.
Okay. The poll question is, can Frost and Sullivan be your transformation partner? You can talk to our experts to dive deeper into transformational strategies and explore specific needs within your company. Also, you can become a Frost growth expert in your area of specialization and share your expertise and passion with the community through our think tanks. Also, you can join Frost and Sullivan's Growth Council and gain access to think tanks focused on transformational growth strategies. Finally, you are able to designate your company as a company to action to increase exposure to investors, new M&A opportunities, and other growth prospects for your business. Back to you now, Vikrant.
Thank you so much. Yes. So Chris, this is something that comes often in our conversation with the enterprises. Once we start explaining all that 5G has to offer, all the possibilities, technologies, platforms, etc., there's this sense that sometimes still comes up, is that 5G is complex and there's a lot of dependencies, and sometimes, I wouldn't say it's very common, but sometimes customers still don't understand how much to invest in 5G and how to future-proof their deployment. Now, Ramesh talked a little bit about this, you did as well, but when you are out in the field, how does Booz Allen Hamilton help create this customized 5G strategies for your clients that align well with their business blueprints and make it simple? It's a very fundamental question, but I think that's also an important question.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to what I mentioned before of just following those good strategy and systems engineering best practices with an emphasis on initially trying to identify, okay, what do you want to do with this technology? What are the types of use cases you're trying to achieve? And sometimes the deployment of 5G is the benefits can be on the simple side, but really effective, whether it be, hey, if I do this, I'm going to get more performance out of my network and require fewer G-node Bs and access points, let's say, in a Wi-Fi network, or by being able to get this extended video feed, I can actually not have someone sit out in the field and observe things and monitor things, right? So I think it's really about trying to understand at the outset, what is the goal that is trying to be achieved, and what is the scale by which you want to deploy 5G? And then that can drive the rest, whether it be, hey, I really don't need it, ultimately, or hey, I need it, but it might be more of a network slice I need from a carrier, or I need to deploy my own private instantiation in which there might be different types of security requirements and the like. It'll really drive that. So I think that's what we try to advise our clients and work with them on the strategy prior to actually embarking on the engineering aspects of that. Yeah. And then, I think part of it is also how to future-proof it. That is where, again, those requirements come into play. But of course, things change, right? Especially in an agile world. So it's really trying to get to, where is the industry going? Things like CNF, Open RAN, the latest 3GPP standards, so that you can try as much as possible to make things plug and play, so that if you need to upgrade later, you can.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. So what's interesting with 5G is that there is strong interest from governments, not just in North America, but literally around the world, in exploring the use of 5G. And when we look at historical evolution of different technologies, a strong government support always plays a big role, because you get the resources, you test these next generation applications in really strenuous conditions, including defense applications. What are your thoughts on, what do you think the impact of such dual use technologies would be in driving innovation in 5G, Chris?
Yeah, I think it's a bi-directional case, right? Here in the United States, we've seen a significant amount of industrial policy funding the development of new technologies, right? 5G has been a big focus area, with funding going into the Defense Department as well as Department of Commerce to try to really instigate and push industry towards development of new products that are standards-based and really have these new features. But as far as the dual use, it's bi-directional, right? Our government clients like to see the commercial technologies, where they're going, and get those deployed within their networks as well. And what is the latest of the state of the art? Because they understand that they might be a large customer, and we shouldn't discount that. But this is more the U.S. government as a customer rather than a policy setting. But but on the flip side, they understand that they're never going to have the market influence, let's say, of that is on the consumer market with Apple, with the billions of devices that they're able to deploy. So really trying to understand what are those enterprise use cases and bringing it into their realm so that they can piggyback on the advancements that we see commercially. But the reverse direction is true as well, where the government is able to push the bar in terms of the features and technologies that are available, as well as fund the development of new technologies. There's infamously the CHIPS Act and the Public Wireless Innovation Fund that has been made available, that across the industry, whether it be integrators, universities, OEM vendors, carriers, are trying to take advantage of in order to get those new technologies developed, at least in the case of microelectronics, across that valley of death, if you will, in terms of the development of new semiconductor chips, or being able to use the Public Wireless Innovation Fund to push things like Open RAN and the like. So I really think it's like this three different types of cases in terms of dual use. Government adopting what commercial has, understanding the economies of scale, government pushing the bar with some of their requirements with commercial, because they're still very much a large customer, and then just the direct funding of the development of new technologies.
Yes, I agree, Chris. Thank you for that, and thank you for
that's at least a United States perspective on it, right?
Yes, definitely. And I think that's important to recognize that it's, in addition to supporting, the government itself is also a customer, and sometimes the government has to work in almost a symbiosis relationship here with co-creation, co-development, and almost a co-dependency between the two sides. So that's good for everybody, I guess. So coming back to you, Ramesh. So we talk about 5G, we talked about what it takes, we talk about monetization, network-aware applications. But if you look at the whole industry dynamics, the whole stack, network, orchestration, service assurance, application enablement platforms such as yours, everything must be tied together. Everything must operate seamlessly. Where do you think we are in this journey overall? And what would your recommendations would be for the enterprises that are just about in the early stages of their 5G journeys? Ramesh, starting with you, Ramesh.
Yeah, so I think like Chris mentioned about this 5G as a service offering is becoming very popular. Now, what I see market heading towards is when enterprises deploy this technology, this is a telecom network. Enterprises have not operated the telecom networks before. So 5G as a service is a very attractive offering where the system integrators or wireless service providers have tested the entire stack end to end and then delivered that as a solution to the customer. So I see that as a big trend where enterprises will go with that type of an approach because that gives them less burden. Learning the less faster learning curve for them, so that way they can probably go with a managed service model per year, right? And then they can do the services by themselves. In terms of a journey or a roadmap, right? On how can customers start on their journey? What I see is the first step in the 5G, private 5G deployments in an enterprise is customers start with, like Chris said, strategy, right? Why are we deploying this network? What is our business problem? And what is the outcome? What are the metrics? And it's important to bring all the right stakeholders. For example, if you're doing in manufacturing, you're doing in a mining, you need to bring in your IT and OT teams together so that there is a collaboration that happens between those two vendors. The second thing is about the industry ecosystem, right? That needs to also come together. Network equipment vendors, the system integrators, the application developers, all of them also have to come together. So the first step is about having a strong business strategy. And then second step is I see customers maybe start with the trials, right? Like a proof of concepts to get the basic connectivity going. That's the essential part. And then the use cases around asset tracking and so forth. Then I see customers moving towards the advanced network awareness type of use cases, where they look for mission critical use cases that require the applications interacting with the network and that give them a higher return and on their investment. So I see this 2-3 phase journey that enterprises use to adopt this particular new technology.
Thank you. Yes, I think it has to be a phased approach. Obviously, POCs will be there. Yes, and as Chris, you said a few times, always keep the outcome of the objective in mind, and sometimes you may have to work backwards from that, right? So I think that's always important. Yes, I think the last topic of discussion before we move on to question and answers, and this is something that is going to be very interesting. But for both Chris and Ramesh, can you share a big prediction related to the future of wireless communication and monetization of whatever the network G may be in use? But let's say you have to think about the state of the industry 5-10 years in the future and bring out a big prediction here. What would that be? Ramesh, if you don't mind going first here.
Yeah, I was thinking about this one, and so the 5G adoption has picked up, like you said, but it is yet to take mainstream in the enterprises, right? And I see 5G advanced coming up as a part of the 3GPP release 18, and I see industry is also talking about 6G, right? What I see happening maybe in the next 5 years. I don't think I can do beyond 5 or even 3. Is I see 5G taking mainstream adoption in critical use cases. For example, today we talked about video being a big sensor. Mobile medic is another example. Drone-based inspections we talked about. Beyond line of sight operated, teleoperated vehicles. These are some of the use cases we are actively working with our customers. We see some of these use cases take mainstream as a solution approach, delivering outcomes to the enterprise customers. And we also see probably evolution of some application platforms and marketplaces where CSPs open up their APIs, more and more developers start building innovative applications. Then the solution development will become faster, innovation will be much faster. We don't have to depend on one vendor to create a solution, right? Once you open up an application ecosystem and the developer platforms, more and more applications will come. So that's what I see happening in the enterprise side. And in the consumer side, I think I see probably using the 5G features or maybe 5G advanced, like network slicing, will enable the use cases like autonomous vehicles. And probably the stadium experiences, the fan experiences is something that I see adoption have type of use cases happen in the public 5G network side of it.
Great, thanks, Ramesh. And Chris, any big predictions? Yeah.
I think the killer use case for 5G will be 6G. We've seen the even numbered Gs be the Gs where widespread adoption has truly occurred, you know. So 4G LTE really led to the proliferation of app stores and Netflix and Amazon or other types of services on mobile devices. So I think really what we'll see is a lot of things that are happening now with 5G is kind of a lead up to that, you know, and we're starting to see movement on it, right? Things like Open RAN or XApps R apps, which will help you tailor the performance of the network to different types of use cases. 5G NTN, we're starting to see out in the marketplace some interest in that with direct satellite communications to mobile devices, with announcements by several companies around that end, you know, time-sensitive networking. And I think a lot of these advancements that we're talking about as part of 5G will then bleed into 6G. And then that's when we're going to see more of that wide-scale adoption of these different types of devices that will take advantage of the network. And we will see that as a service models, deployment of your own private wireless instances, as well as access to differentiated types of services from the carriers themselves will become even easier to consume. And so I think that's when we're going to see the V2X use cases. That's when we're going to see the massive number of devices out there that might even replace some of the existing technologies in use today, like RFID as an example. And so I think that's when we're really going to see that, or even XR, holograms, you know, all of those types of technologies, I think we're going to see more of in the next generation, if you will. Again, it's not like you flip a switch and one day you're 5G, the next day you're 6G. But I think a lot of these advancements will flow into that next G, and that's when we're going to see more of that wide scale adoption of these different types of use cases, different types of applications, and cool devices that we're going to see.
Yeah. And innovation is, you know, not always a straight journey, and it's a continuum, right? And I think that's a very interesting thought there, Chris, that I think we saw between 3G and 4G really being transformative now, almost a similar case between 5G and 6G, wherein all the hard work that's been done to not only create these new technologies, but to fine tune them and, you know, optimize them based on real world learnings. And then we culminate into this wonderful environment wherein, you know, you could call it 6G or next 5G or next G or whatever, but I think that's the right way we're going. So I just want to make sure we have time to answer the few audience questions that have come in. So the first question that's coming, and I think both Ramesh and Chris, but starting with you, Ramesh, here. So, the question is that we see, based on our research, things like remote surgery, autonomous vehicles, and virtual reality as potentially, strong use cases. Could you please comment on 5G related to remote surgery from both Booz Allen and Shabodi perspectives? I guess both Chris and Ramesh, but Ramesh, maybe you want to go first, and then Chris, you can talk about that. But the question is 5G related to remote surgeries. And what do you think about that?
So let me start there. I mean, we started off with remote mentoring through the mobile medic application that Booz has brought in using the Shabodi platform. And that's something we showcased to the industry, and Booz is actively working on deploying that. I think the natural progression will be to do the surgeries, but I'm sure it requires a lot of approvals, right, from the FDA and others to do that. That's typically a long process, but I think it is possible. I think the technology is available. It requires some innovators to come forward, work with people like us, and we'll be willing to work with them. Just like how Jeffrey Moore talks about the crossing the chasm. So we need some of those innovators to come forward and try this technology for those use cases. Chris?
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. As Ramesh mentioned, we've been doing work on this mobile medic application. We've done work for our clients around telementoring, if you will, where you might have someone local there who doesn't have the full expertise. It's sort of a triage situation. And through XR-based technologies and other IoT sensors, you can get instructions from someone remote. I think I think on the technology side, we're still going to have to make sure for remote surgery itself that we get to the reliability that is really needed for that, right? And that works up the stack, as we referenced previously, right? Is ensuring that the network is designed that way, and maybe it's even getting into things like time-sensitive networking and the like to make sure that the performance is there to support it. And then you have the prioritization schema that Ramesh references, as well as just the resiliency within the application itself, right? The application cannot go down. And then on the policy side is, does the medical community feel comfortable with that? And does it have the right resiliency within it to be able to support something like that? So, I think both sides of that coin need to be answered in order for us to get into remote surgery, but it's certainly, a very interesting use case and one which could push the bar technologically as well as the questions we ask from a policy perspective.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ramesh. So there's this question that comes in. It's about security, and I guess Chris, you may want to comment on that. But can you talk about how do you approach security when we talk about these next generation use cases for 5G? Do you view security as one of the major issues that needs to be addressed? What's your approach when you work with deploying 5G for your customers, and how do you address the security challenges in that?
Yeah, I think that it's from two perspectives, right? There's the security of the network when I am the operator of that network. So adopting, let's say, zero trust principles in terms of the management and operations of that network are really critical, as well as making sure that it implements all of the security standards that we see in the 3GPP or Open RAN or other things to ensure that it is appropriately secure and hardened. One of the things that we've been working with some of the existing companies within the 5G ecosystem is really adapting from a carrier mindset where downtime is the last thing you want. Not to say that carriers also are very concerned about security, to one in enterprises, especially mission critical enterprises, where perhaps you can get planned downtime in order to make sure that you are compliant with your security requirements. And that does lead to a little bit different mindset and a little bit more of allowing the operator of that of those devices to be able to implement patches and implement upgrades and make sure that their equipment are compliant with some of the security standards that we see within the public sector space. So I think that's really the adaptation that needs to occur, especially as these traditional telecommunications company offer their services as private implementations within the enterprise space.
Yes. Great insights. Thanks, Chris. I know we are on top of the hour, but we'll have to end our session here. So I hope the audience found this informative. I certainly did. Thank you both, Chris and Ramesh, for sharing valuable insights with us today. And the recording of today's session will be available on demand after after a few minutes. I hope all of you have a great rest of your day. We will see you next month for another think tank on 5G and the various aspects related to 5G monetization. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you once again for joining, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikrant.
Thank you, Vikrant.
Bye.
So long.